Welcome to Genuine Humans, exploring the stories behind the great marketing leaders of our time and hearing how their journeys have influenced the brands they've built. Brought to you by The Social Element, here are our hosts, Tamara Littleton, CEO and founder, and Wendy Christie, Chief People Officer.
Welcome back to the Genuine Humans podcast, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Wendy.
Hi, Tamara. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And we're actually joined today by the wonderful Linn Frost, who is the marketing director for Virgin Red. Welcome, Linn.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Have you got a little bit of a cold there, Linn?
I have. I'm going for that Phoebe and Friends thing, that sort of husky, sexy voice. Is what it should be like. It may not quite be that like that.
Rocking it. So now, Linn, you've been in the agency world for a good chunk of your career, and you've worked with some incredible brands like Dove, Bacardi, M&S, and Virgin, and then you switched over to work with Virgin in-house. How has it been for you switching from agency to brands?
I went to the other side. There's always, I think, it's a slightly unusual route because I've had 23 years in agency and then to go client side. So I waited a long time to do it. But there was always a part of me, and I think every agency or account man particularly thinks I can be a better client, which is really awful. And it turns out that it's not as easy as it looks. So I was very much like, I'm going to be the client I've always wanted. I'm going to make loads of brave decisions and be really decisive. And it's just, do you know what? It's just not as easy as you think it is. There's a lot of things that you don't consider that your client's role is, and people say this, but your agency is, and the creative side is such a small part of your role. So there's so many other factors and other things that you need to do. So it's not quite as easy to make those snap decisions or not let other factors affect what you do. So
yeah, of course.
But it's been, it's been amazing. I sort of see it as like a mini MBA in client side and marketing. And also, I think for me, just having that wealth of experience from the other side really helps. I feel like all of the stepping stones, I've worked pretty much in every different sort of channel or discipline. So I felt like this Virgin role is that all coming together because I now have a really good holistic understanding, sort of all the different channels and all of the different areas.
And a great contact book, I'm sure, as well.
Yes, that does help.
So going back a little bit further, what actually sort of pulled you into marketing in the first place? Can you sort of go back and share your career journey with us?
So I can. And bizarrely, it starts out, I think I'm a bit of an anomaly or maybe a strange child, but about the age of 9, I decided I wanted to work in advertising. There was a documentary and it was the Spastic Society were renamed themselves. And I loved this program. The thing that I loved about it was they were solving a problem. They had a brief, they were solving a problem, and all of these people in a room had ideas, and it was that real sort of back and forth brainstorming. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I've always been more on the creative side. So I've always been really art and concepts and talking about ideas has always been one of my sort of natural strengths. And I didn't really know. It's really interesting. You don't know which role. You don't understand that there's different roles in advertising. You just go, I want to make those adverts. They're really cool. And I think as a child of the 80s, we had the best of advertising. Like my brother and I used to play the game of guess which advert it was and each ad break. And it was probably more entertaining than some of the things that we were watching. I mean, it's a big part of our childhood. So for me, it was I want to make this really amazing content. And then for my secondary school interview, I actually recreated the Persil ads. You know, when you put the dirt on a sheet and then and then you put and I actually did a live demonstration in my secondary school interview. And then it sort of stuck with me. And it's always been I was very clear what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an account director. And when I found out what the roles were, and I wanted to go into like one of the best advertising agencies that I could. At the time, it was BBH or Ogilvy. They were the ones. I mean, they were living life, and it was just there was everything about it really was really appealing to me.
I love that you were planning that at 9. That is so fantastic. And it's funny actually because you're right. There was that sort of golden age of advertising, and I remember when I was babysitting for young kids, and I was only a young kid myself. I think I was like 15 or something, which seems so weird now. But there was one of the dads was in advertising, and I thought it was a really exciting career because he wore red glasses.
Brilliant. Or red suede loafers normally. The thing is, you can decide that you want to be part of that, but as I go back to that roles, you don't really know who does what. So
Yeah.
and then also getting in. So at that time, it was incredibly hard to get into advertising. So I'm not from the sort of the natural background. So I know that when I started applying for jobs, they were really looking for Oxbridge. So it was Oxford and Cambridge graduates. I'm somebody that's dyslexic. So I grew up as a child not being particularly academic. And I've learned as an adult that actually your intelligence is nothing to do with how academic you are. But as a child, I really struggled with that. And then, so it was sort of like, if you want to come in, there's these different roles. I don't think I was really a creative. And the account handling role was the one because I love talking about ideas. So, and that was going back to that documentary. That's the bit, stand up in a room, sell an idea. So that was the role that I thought would be best suited to me. But to get that job, I had to have a degree. They wouldn't even consider that you could come in and learn on the job, which is much more suited to who I am. So there was that barrier. So I sort of had to go off and do a degree, even though I didn't want to. And I did it part-time. So my route in actually was around work experience. So I sort of knew that I wouldn't necessarily be that traditional graduate. I probably wouldn't have got in on the graduate programme if I'd applied because I didn't tick those boxes. You'd have looked at my CV and you would have put it to the bottom of the pile. And it was quite interesting. Early in my career, I didn't get a job interview with another agency because I didn't tick that university box. So my uni was in London. It was London Met. It wasn't considered to be the right level. Luckily, I got a work experience opportunity. Well, I say luckily, I made sure I got a work experience opportunity. And that's how I got in. So I did a lot of work experience. And once you're in action, people can see you. And that's how I went in through the back door, as it were, which was very fortunate.
But I think having that goal younger to sort of say that's what I want to do meant that you kind of pushed through in that path and had that tenacity.
Yeah, and I sort of say this now. I've done some talks recently with the Marketing Academy and Lisa Goodchild, her amazing DigiRise. And my one piece of advice is if you know that you want to do it, just find a way. And I can't tell you about the value of work experience because it's your opportunity to go in there and it's going to be rubbish. You are going to, in our day, you made tea and you moved boxes. And I think I've reorganised countless tape cupboards. Obviously, they don't have to do that now. But it's what you do when you get there. So I go around and talk to as many people as possible, ask them what they do, be engaging, be a real sort of positive spirit and ask them if you can help with anything. So as I've said, that's my one piece of advice to anybody that wants to break into anything and not just our industry. It's just, if you don't have contacts, I think that's a lot of the excuse. I say it's an excuse, but I've met a few young people recently and they said, oh, it's all about who you know and I don't know anyone. And I'm like, well, find someone. You've got LinkedIn. We didn't have LinkedIn. Go onto LinkedIn, find someone, stalk them, rock up, turn up at their office every day with a coffee for them. Eventually, they'll have to let you in or they'll arrest you. But either way, you'll start building your network.
And can I just add that we don't condone stalking? LinkedIn stalking. No, you're absolutely right, though. There's so many tools to be able to connect with people, ask them to, mentor or just, share advice. And yeah, absolutely brilliant.
And it sounds like, as you've already said, that you knew from quite a young age the direction that you wanted to go in. So before you were 9, were there any other ambitions that you had or any other more out there careers that you thought you might fancy?
So I really, really wanted, and I still do now, because I do believe that anyone in marketing always has a bit of a plan B or a bit of something that they've always wanted to do. It doesn't sound dull, but I really want a shop. I want a shop that sells things. It's like that is that local shop for local people. I would love. So as a 7-year-old, my friend and I, Body Shop, again, massive in the 80s, and everyone had those baskets with the straw, and you'd hair dryer the the cellophane. So my friends and I used to play, we've got a body shop, and we would like make up baskets and hairdryer them and sell them. My part-time job when I was 16, so I was always really super keen to get out to work. That was my main objective, which is why I think I struggled with going down that academic route, because for me something needs to be real and tangible for me to do it. And I worked in Next for 2 years in Bond Street, and I loved it. I was the head cashier, and I just loved the whole buzz of being with people. I think that's my main. I think one of my main things that I enjoy the most is talking to people, meeting new people, and helping them. Like, I'd be really genuinely. Like, it'd be a real sort of a great feeling when I've actually found someone of the best skirt, or I've advised them, or so I've always been really keen on fashion. I'd actually say from a career choice perspective, it would have been fashion in a shop, or as I said, advertising, something creative. And then just in the same territory, I've always had a passion and love for magazines. So I was the child that rock up at school. So when I started secondary school, and I know I'm jumping around with ages, but I would always be the one that bought every single magazine. So I'd have Just 17, more, smash hits, and I'd trawl through them. So it was either going to be a career in magazines publishing, I was going to have a shop, or I worked in advertising. So I might still get the shop. I'd still love to sell things.
Yes. Well, you might still. There's something about the till as well, isn't there? One of my favourite toys as a small child was a till. And then when I had my first part-time shop job, that was, oh my God, I get to work the till. There's really something about that. And the magazines. I can remember planning my first holiday without my parents, and going to the travel agent, picking up all the brochures, and just that tangible thing's lovely. Given that you didn't have LinkedIn as a teenager, if you could go back and advise your teenage self, what would you say?
So for me, it'd be around confidence. So I was always slightly different to everybody else, in the sense I was a little bit maturer than my peer group, but I was also racked with insecurities and anxiety. I'd say more insecurities than anxiety, but possibly it is that, because I worried a lot. I worried about everything. I worried about what people thought of me. As I said, I was really into fashion, and I will never forget, there was, if you remember Olympus, it was like the JD Sports of now. And there was this bag, and it was bright. It was 3 colours. It was bright pink, bright turquoise, and I think it had cream. Anyway, it was an out there bag, and I wanted that bag. But I was so scared that it was so different to what everybody else had that I would get picked on. I was quite bullied as a child, because we moved from a different area into the area that I grew up in, and we didn't have any money. So I had secondhand clothing, and I just always felt that I didn't quite fit in. So I spent a lot of my time just trying to be liked, desperately wanting people to like me, which therefore means that you are a real target for bullies, because you're so desperate for validation and you want them to like you. And I did want to be a bit different, but I was so scared of standing out. So I think for me, I had a big turning point, actually turning 40, where I just decided that, and actually having children changes you as well. There's life stages that mean that you start realizing that actually it doesn't matter about the things that you might not quite 100% fit in. You have your own choices. And I just think confidence, if I could go back and talk to myself, it would be to say, you are okay. Lynn, you are absolutely fine. And it doesn't matter. And just go for it. Be yourself. And if somebody doesn't like that, it really just, then they're not right for you. And have that confidence to be on my own. Because I was so desperate for friends, and I didn't want to be on my own. But if I could just say to myself, do you know what? It's fine if you're here on your own, you've got no friends, because they would then follow. But I didn't get that then. And I try really hard. So I've got 12-year-old twins, and they're at that age. I mean, I try all along the way to give them that self-esteem that I didn't have, to tell them that if they want to do something, it's absolutely fine. And it's not quite, I mean, they'll be like, but mum, but it's not so easy. I'm like, I know, but I just don't want them growing up with that insecurity that I had, and that desperate need for validation, because I think it then does go into your work life. So I've always had, I mean, it's well known now as that imposter syndrome. It's a well-known thing, but I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm better now, but in my early career, particularly, I was always thinking, I'm not good enough. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, or have that academic background. I'm not clever enough. I would really question my opinions, and I possibly wouldn't speak up, because I was a bit worried in case I was wrong, or I'd question myself. And I just wish that I wasted a lot of years feeling like that. And I would love to go back and just say, do you know what? No one knows what they're doing. Being
Yeah.
intelligent is nothing to do if you can write an essay or not. It's about how you articulate yourself, and just go for it. Don't look for validation, because when you look for it, you become vulnerable.
I think that moment when there's someone that you really look up to, when you find out that they've got imposter syndrome as well,
Yes.
it's just such a huge thing. It's so helpful. And so, sort of coming maybe more up to date, maybe not. What's the worst job that you've ever had?
Oh, this is an easy answer, and I can name them because they no longer exist. So, as I mentioned, I've sort of worked since I was 15, or actually 14. I had a very brief job in a cafe. It wasn't the worst job, but it wasn't brilliant. I was terrible. My first day, the coffee machine, I managed to blow up the coffee machine, and the cups flew and coffee flew. But that wasn't the worst job. My worst one was Yes Car Credit. I don't know if you remember them. They used to give extortionate credit, like interest rates. And it was like this showroom, and it was full of these men who were, I mean, they wouldn't have got away with it today. They were horrendous. I mean, in fact, they were so un-PC that it was actually quite funny. It was almost like a comedy. And my job was to go down and talk people through their financial contracts. And basically, it was such a bad deal that I used to almost talk people out of them. And then I'd get into a load of trouble because they wouldn't get their sale. But I did it for about, I think I might have lasted 3 months. And then thankfully, I got an opportunity to go and work at Ogilvy as a PA, actually, as a part-time PA. And that was my route in. I then got the work experience, and then I got my job. But I was saved, because it was quite a low point. I have to be honest. I was thinking, oh my God, is this it?
Did you see Swiss Tony on the Fast Show?
Oh, yeah. I have, yes, it was like
He's
that.
surrounded by Swiss Tonys.
Yeah. You could have, it would have been a writer's dream if they came in. They could have written a whole brilliant piece on working there.
I'm assuming that you're not going to name anyone from Yes Car Credit to answer this question, but which genuine humans that you've worked with over the years have influenced your career?
I've been so lucky that I've got so many, and all sort of come at the right stages. So right at the beginning, there's this woman called Sarah Taylor. She was actually my hairdresser from the age of 11. And I sort of see her as a bit of an aunt relationship. We grew up together. She was 18. I think I was one of her first clients, or my mum was. And she just moved to London from Hastings. And we just got on, as I said, I was quite mature for my age, and we got on incredibly well. And she met her, who is her now husband, and he had set up his own design agency, and she sort of knew what I wanted to do, and she put me in touch with Stuart, and he gave me my first job as a studio manager, because I haven't come from a family that's got sort of money to support going off into education. My mum's a single mum. I mean, she's done brilliantly, but she retrained when she was 40, when I was around 11. So we just didn't have the money saved that I wouldn't need to not work. But Stuart Taylor then took me on as their studio manager, and then they said, look, we know what you want to do about getting into advertising. We know that you need a degree at that time to get into that level that you want to get into. So they let me do a part-time degree while I worked for them, which was amazing. And I'm so lucky. I had a full-time job pretty much, and I got to use their design studio, and they supported me, and they let me go off and do my course. So that was amazing. And then Sarah Hurst. So I mentioned Ogilvy. So desperate to get into Ogilvy that and then carrying on with that working part-time, that there was a part-time PA's job in the PR department. I took it, and the job itself was pretty much filling up the photocopier with paper and checking out spreadsheets. I was pretty terrible at it, if I'm honest, because I was so preoccupied with offering my services for brainstorms and any meeting that they needed. So when you work in a big agency, you often get called into focus groups or ideation sessions, and I was there, and I used to then skip uni to sit in the afternoon so I could brainstorm. And through that, this woman Sadie, who head up HR, again, I got to know her, and I talked to her about the work experience. She put me in touch with Sarah Hurst, who was quite senior in the account management department. We worked on a Tilda Rice pitch together, and because I love talking to people and I'm relatively confident at doing it, I went off and did this Vox Pops on the streets, Vox Pops, and they won the pitch. And she just sort of said, look, we've got to have you. And she introduced me to the head of account management, and I got my first job as an account executive. And she, throughout my whole career, has been fantastic. So people that open doors for you, I think that's, but they do it because they're genuine humans, and they do it in that way because they really care about letting other good humans have opportunities. So she's been brilliant, and she checks in on me periodically just to check I'm okay. And then just going through to be more recent, Simon Lebet. So I worked at Truant, which was the prior to Virgin, and he's fantastic because he gets lots of sort of invites to black ties or networking events, and he'd be like, I'm bringing Linn, or Linn, you go in my place. And just any opportunity in the industry. He took me to Cannes my first time and really just made sure that I could build a network. So, and put me forward every time. You have to talk to Linn. She runs our agency for us. So he's been a real champion. And then I can't forget my most recent, and she's a totally fabulous human. And Tamara and Wendy, you know her well because she's done a podcast with you. But Emma Harris, who we met 2 years ago, and you couldn't meet a more genuine human than Emma. And bundle of warmth and love and amazingness. And she immediately decided that we were sort of kin, which we are, very, very similar. But she's done the same thing that Simon's done. So you have to be part of this. And anything that she does, she invites me to. And that's just amazing because it's all about those opportunities. If there's, as I said, if there's a talk or a panel, she'll be Linn will do it. Or so she's brilliant at sort of at giving me those opportunities, and then also making sure I've got that confidence to do it. You'll smash it, and you smashed it. And
text me and tell me how you smashed it.
Yeah, she's like my champion, and but without those people on my journey, I don't know where I'd be. But those people, they see something in you that you don't necessarily see, and give you that confidence and those opportunities to be you. So I'm incredibly grateful. And I hope I meet more on my journey. As I said, I don't feel like it's at the end yet.
I think we all need an Emma in our life, don't we?
Definitely.
We were lucky enough to have the fabulous Lee McGuffey talk to us in the first series of the podcast. And Virgin Red was about to launch at that time. So it's now launched. Can you tell us how it's all going?
Really well. So Lee and I have been on a great journey together. So Virgin Red is a startup, but you're part of a big legacy. So you've got that dichotomy of legacy brand, phenomenal brand, and business, and then you are a startup within it. So you've got the best of both worlds. So we pulled together sort of this whole 360 campaign, but in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah. So it was this. Do we, don't we? What do we do? What's the right... And I think the main impact was we were always going to have to go because we needed to launch, but it was doing it in the right way. And I think that was so Virgin's very confident brand, and it's always about we almost were doing it the Virgin way, but that didn't feel right. That felt quite tonally deaf to what was going on, particularly as people we're all about experience and getting out there. A big part of our product is flying and travel. So again, it was that, how can we launch in a way that we're being sensitive to what's going on around us? So we decided to go for something that was positive and uplifting, and we wanted to time it like a lot of other brands did at the same time, unfortunately, but we wanted to time that coming out of lockdown and that feeling of freedom. Truant and Glow came up with this really lovely idea of this girl that's walking along in the park, and she blows a bubble, and the bubble gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and she takes off. And it's that feeling of being out again and looking down on that world around you. And the whole thing is that with Virgin Red in your life, things are going to be better. That it's going to be rewarding. It's that rewarding feeling. And they presented other creative routes similar to that, where it was all about that amazing feeling of we are free, we're out, just really experiencing life in the world because we've been so locked away. But the best bit for me is that we got to go to Bulgaria and shoot it. So I was just desperate to travel again. And I had the three most amazing days with the most amazing people making this ad and I think for me that was that moment when I go, oh my God, I'm the client in the room. So you're sat so you get there, and I'm so used to being on the agency side, and then I'm looking around and we're going like, where's the client? managing. So your job as an agency is always to find out what's going on and then keep the client away, basically, manage the client, make sure that they only hear the stuff that they need to hear and they make the right decisions. And then I suddenly realised quite quickly that was me. But it was quite strange because I'm part of the crew because that's who I am. So it was that weird moment of realisation that I was actually meant to be the grown-up in the room and I had to make those decisions. But that was fantastic.
And it's the Virgin brand is so iconic. Was it easy for you to sort of start living the brand from day one? Or, is it different for you being on the inside?
So I feel like somebody, and I think a lot of people of my generation have lived with Virgin their
Yeah.
whole lives, so for me, probably it's that 90s, it was V Festival, but even Richard in his story, like we've grown up with Richard. So he's in his 70s now, but I feel like I remember when it launched, like we grew up with him as he did. And it was it's such a fabric of our growing, of our being Virgin, like of our sort of in looking at brands that are brave and brands that are disruptive. So in my career as somebody that's been in marketing and advertising, many a time if we talked about Virgin or brought Virgin up as a good example when you're wanting a brand to be braver or do something different, or we would always bring up Virgin as a case study. I was at Rainey Kelly, who had Virgin Trains and Virgin Atlantic, and so I've always sort of felt like Virgin's been part of my DNA anyway. And I've always been fortunate enough, you mentioned the other brands that I've worked with, that in my career, I've almost managed to choose the brand, like go for the brands. I'd always get to the agency I'm in, I'd think, which brands do I really want to work with? So like Dove, Brave, phenomenal. I got to do the second Real Beauty campaign, which was like the most amazing thing to actually work on it. Lots of people say they did, but I actually really did, which was phenomenal. And then I worked with the Army. Again, really brave, really, really different. So I actually pitched for the business for Truant and Glow. And when they sort of said it's a pitch for Virgin, you're just like, oh my God, absolutely. Like you do anything because you want to touch that brand. Like you want to touch the brand that you've admired. So it was actually relatively, luckily, quite easy to slip in because I've almost felt like I've always wanted to work within it or known so much about it.
Yeah, of course. You talked a lot about sort of, brands being brave and obviously Virgin being brave. Who else is kind of really impressing you at the moment?
There's two people that have been brave really recently that I go, wow, I wished I'd done that. So KFC, I mean, they had the Colonel, what they've done with the Colonel. So brands are often quite scared of changing their heritage or changing things that are iconic to them. And they've really just thrown the rule book out and gone, do you know what? We're going to have some fun with this. The chicken moment for me, when they ran out of chicken, I mean, that was absolutely brilliant and genuine. And do you know what? Let's hold our hands up and own this. For me, that's bravery. When you can just go, do you know what? We're going to be humans about this and we're going to admit stuff. And I mean, there was my favourite clip that was on the news when they were like, it was that they drove that demand for their brand and their product and they weren't even delivering it. So she was like, oh my God, we've run out of chicken. I'm going to have to go to Burger King, but I don't want Burger King. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know if I remember if it was Burger King, but is that if you've got videos, if you can get members of the public to say that about your brand, oh my God, that is just phenomenal. And they're continuing to, I mean, I don't necessarily love all of their executions, but again, they're continuing to throw that rule book out. Let's not have loads of copy on our ads. I think they've got some erotic pictures of people, billboards that I've seen recently of people eating chicken. I don't necessarily love it, if I'm being honest, but it's brave and it's different and it means that they can stand out. And I think like the Colonel, they've got people dressing up as the Colonel. And I mean, it's fantastic. It's like, I mean, for me, that's like the best in marketing. And then the other one for me, and I'm never sure if I can pronounce the brand properly, but it was the Viva La Vulva and the
Labrise, yes.
Labrise. Oh my God. I mean, to just make the vagina your main campaign, so far removed from anything in the category beforehand. But for me, it was how they did it. So it wasn't shocking. It was beautiful and it was stunning. And no one's ever used female anatomy in that way. And it's like how amazing the vagina is and the fact that they celebrated it in the way that they did. I mean, I don't think many people can match that. And also what they did is they opened that door. I mean, you've had a lot of Me Too's of people trying to do a similar campaign, but for me, they nailed it because it didn't have a shock factor. So I think you don't have to shock to be brave, and you can do things in really beautiful ways, and it can be equally as equal sort of standout.
Absolutely. It was such a joyful campaign. I can't count the amount of people that I shared it to. It was just like, you've got to see this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just beautiful, beautiful. So you mentioned the Marketing Academy and you've been sort of, giving talks, etc. What piece of advice would you give to any future marketing leaders?
I mean, I would say be genuine humans yourself. Actually, so now that I'm in this position, and I keep on pinching myself that I've actually made it to marketing director, because that was ultimately my top goal. I'm like, I want to be I want to be the marketing director. And for me, it's about giving people those opportunities, like looking for people and enable them to grow. Like, really, do you know what? It's not about the output. I mean, there'd be lots of advice on that too. But for me, in our industry, we're still not brilliant at how we treat our teams and our staff. And the thing that makes me feel really sad, and it's why I've actually thought about leaving the industry many, many a time, when I went off on maternity leave. I mean, to be fair, I got pregnant with the twins at that point because I wanted a break. I was like, I didn't know I was going to have twins. That was the only thing. I was so sort of fatigued and exhausted. And I thought, you know what, I'll have a baby now because I can have a year of maternity leave. Then I had twins. So that didn't really pan out the way I thought it would. But for me to have that mindset of I need to have a baby to have a break, or some days you think, oh, if an ambulance just picked me up now, I could have a little lie down. It's not brilliant.
It's not a good sign.
No, that's not right, is it? No.
It's not. And I think we've got to, so aside of like spotting talent and really being that door opener for people and really encouraging people, I think in a general, marketing, advertising, our whole industry needs to think about the hours that we work, how we work. As a client, I'm trying really hard not to impose last minute deadlines, but to be honest, I get those from the people that run the business. It all sort of trickles down. And I think everybody, and we're in this culture that's ingrained in that we work really, really hard and we work really long hours and everything's urgent. Everything's urgent. It's always ASAP. And I think we've got to stop that. We've got to make sure we nurture our team of people that are coming up and we ensure that they know they can have a work-life balance. I would say that I lost my 20s to advertising. I did UK and global. So I say this all the time. I did my UK job 9 till 5 and my global job 5 p.m. till midnight. And I'd get a taxi home every night. And by the weekend, I was so exhausted. And I believe it hasn't really changed much since then. So I think we've got to look at life balance, how we work, give ourselves time to do that, to do the job. What we do is it's complicated. It takes a lot to have a good idea. You need to have time to develop it. So I just think we can all, as an industry, come together and actually put in those parameters that means that we do better work, but we're also not exhausted. It doesn't kill us.
Absolutely. It's funny actually, because I think over the last 18 months with lockdown, pandemic, that there have been more discussions about trying to balance, because so many people have been trying to work through whilst there have been children at home, or caring for parents, or just working by yourself. It's been so different for people, but intense. And there's been a lot more talk about burnout, looking after your teams, not trying to spend all day on Zoom. I like to think that now that it's more open and discussed more, that we can make those changes in the industry. But I still see sort of job ads, where people are talking about fast-paced industry, and it's kind of, you're right, the culture is very much, it's going to be crazy, it's going to be busy, it's all about late nights. But it doesn't have to be like that, with some respect and care and good collaboration with teams and good energy and relationships. True partnerships shouldn't mean that people are meant to work their whole weekend, for example.
I mean, I'm really lucky, and actually one of the reasons that as I said, I've been thinking about client side for a long, long time, but I hadn't found a client that I really wanted to go and work for, because in my time with more independent agencies, they've given me that flexibility to work the hours that I wanted to. It was really important that I did drop-offs and pickups, or some of them with the children. So Truant allowed me to do that, which is one of the reasons why I was there. So I had to be really careful around the more corporate environment that I went into, because you don't often get that. But Virgin are probably the closest you can get to being that agency mentality, or that independent. They've always been very good at flexibility, work where you want, when you want. It's all about making, as long as you're doing your job well, then you can have that time. So we have Friday afternoons off, which are fantastic. you may not always get to take them off, but it means you get time with no calls or no meetings. And we encourage our team to do so. But equally, I've got that. And it's interesting when I'm hiring people, they're really surprised. They're like, oh, can I finish half an hour earlier? And I'm like, you don't need to ask me that. Like, you can just work the hours that you want to work, because they're not used to that environment. They're not used to culturally being allowed to do that. So I'm actually very grateful that, as I said, I chose Virgin for one of those reasons. Loved the brand, but equally I knew that Richard has always been about people and about making sure that you have your right, like that flexibility for mothers or whatever you need to do. It shouldn't just be for parents. It should just be for anybody that may want to do something else, like not do that sort of 9 to 5 because they've got something else on that they do, but they work incredibly hard, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, like they're running a little shop, maybe.
Well, that feels like a good segue onto the part of the podcast where we get a bit more personal. So how do you like to spend your downtime? Do you have any guilty pleasures that we should know about?
Oh, I love television. So for me, Netflix. I didn't really know. I'm one of those people who didn't really know what Netflix and chill meant. but for me, it really means just switching off. I've really enjoyed the Britney documentaries recently. I love the fact that you've got 3 different documentaries. I love a good documentary, and I love that there's 3 different ones. And then I go on a bit of a Googling spiral, like checking all of the facts and seeing what is true. Horrified by what she's been through, but fantastic television. And then recently I had to be in hospital for a while, and it saved me. I just sat and watched White Lotus, The Chair, which was fantastic on Netflix. I mean, to be fair, it probably goes back to my childhood where we did spend a lot of time in front of the television. So for me, it's sort of my drug of choice. I don't drink at home, but I will. The only thing is a bit detrimental to my health because I'm somebody that can't not watch the whole thing. Like if I read a book, I have to read it. I need to know what happens. So you will find me sometimes at 3 a.m, sort of trying to keep my eyes open because I just want to see what happens.
I know what you mean. And you might have already answered this one, but I'll just check in case there's anything else. What's your idea of a perfect weekend?
Ooh, okay. So we start with sort of a late breakfast. I love a breakfast out. So I recently had breakfast at the Hoxton in Holborn. It's the best full English breakfast ever. It's divine. So I'd say absolutely start with a really gorgeous, long, very long breakfast. Then maybe a cruise around some shops, maybe some boutiquey little shops. That would be. This is a blissful, perfect weekend, by the way. Then maybe have lunch, like a long lunch. A lot of my friend's husband jokes that we basically plan our whole time around food.
Nothing wrong with that. Is that not normal?
And actually, so I recently had a day in the Isle of Wight on my own, by circumstance, and that's what I did. So I had a really long breakfast. Then I perused, got myself an ice cream, went to a really lovely independent shop and discovered all of these lovely things, like nice bits of jewellery. And then I found this sort of outside bar on the harbour and ordered myself a cocktail, and then had like this homemade pizza and a Greek salad, and just sat there. Honestly, you know, if you could bottle a day and keep it. And then in the evening, I sort of went back and I was on my own, which sounds awful. I should say I want to hang out with the kids, but I was on my own with a really good book, and I finished the book. And then I had a hot bath and went to bed, and it was like literally
That sounds lovely.
amazing. But I have to add, in case my children do listen to this, which they won't, by the way, because they don't really care what mummy does at work. But another good day would be equally. So my son plays football, and going to watch him is such a privilege. And then also my daughter does a drama class in Angel. So every Saturday she goes and does this drama class that she loves, and then I get an hour and a half to myself to go and have a nice coffee or chill. So if we put those into the perfect weekend, that's also good.
Awesome.
That sounds perfect. If you could wake up tomorrow with one new skill or ability, what would it be?
This is one that doesn't really exist because I've always talked about teleportation. You know, Dorothy can click their heels. Yes. So the fact you could just click your heels and be home, I'd really, really like that.
It's called Uber.
But it's not instant, is it?
No.
I would have said invisibility. And I used to have this dream that I could, Selfridges. So Selfridges was at night, and I could go into Selfridges and just have whatever I wanted and spend the whole evening in there. But I think I'd get frustrated by invisibility because no one could see me. I think I'd get really...
And if you were going to write a book, what would it be about?
That's another really, really good question. Can I just add to skill set that I would love to really be able to sing? So one of my favorite, if you'd ask me the question about my favorite evening out, it has to be Cocktails and Lucky Voice. I'm very loud, but I can't actually sing. So if I could wake up tomorrow with an amazing singing voice, I would be very happy. But sorry, I know I digressed from the other question.
That's fine.
It just occurred to me.
That all works.
I have thought about it, but then I always get to that thing of I don't really know what I would write. It sounds terrible. I quite like those happiness project books. So you almost write that journey of you finding happiness, or I tell everybody about The Secret. So, that positive manifestation and creating so I've written many letters to the universe. I actually met a young man, and you're getting old when you call people young man.
Young man.
But I met this young man yesterday evening at an event, and he was sort of like, when people hear you work at Virgin and you're a marketing director, they're like, oh, you must know about how to create good businesses. And I think they always think they can tap into Richard, or that spirit of Richard. And he's like, what's your piece of advice? And I just sort of said to him, write a letter to the universe. So you write that letter and you say, it's all happened. Everything that you want is happened. And then you fold that letter up and you put it away. And I think that's what I'd love my book to be about, that I've written this letter to the universe, and then your journey of that letter coming true. I think that would be fantastic. In a really witty sort of Bridget Jones style tone of voice.
That sounds completely doable as well.
I just need to get a ghostwriter. because actually, going back to being dyslexic, I'm okay with PowerPoints. Funny enough, bullet points, fine. But the thought of actually writing a book or an essay just fills me with dread. I just can't do it. I cannot it's in my head. I almost need to do it verbally and then get somebody else to write it for me. But I just get this whole massive mental block that I've never been able to overcome. And again, I think we talked earlier about what would you go and tell yourself? And it's like, it doesn't matter, Lynn, if you have this mental block, you can work your way around it.
Yeah. And if we could give you an extra hour every day, what would you do with it?
First thing that comes to mind is sleep. Sleep. Or have that, that lovely day when you wake up at, say, 7, but then you realise you don't have to go anywhere, and you get that hour in bed when you're sort of awake, but you're not awake, but you're just sort of admiring the day around you as it's everyone's waking up, and you're just like, I don't have to move. That's what I would do with my hour.
Yes. How would your friends describe you, and how would you like them to describe you?
So I've been described quite a few times as a bit of a pocket rocket because I'm 5 foot, and I said as my confidence grown, I've just gone for it. So I just go for stuff. Bubbly springs to mind, which I used to hate when I was younger, because bubbly I'd be like, I want to be this formidable person. I don't want to be bubbly and not taken seriously. But I actually met this very successful businesswoman, and I said to her, I'd love to be like you. You're so composed and so calm and collected. And she was like, no, said yours is the secret superpower, because you're so bubbly and warm that actually people will open up to you and they won't see you coming. You'll be like they'll underestimate you at first, but then they'll soon quickly realise that they shouldn't have done that. So I'm quite happy with that. Warm comes up a lot when people describe me, and I'm really proud of that. I'm like, if there's one thing that people say about me when they've met me, is Lynn's really warm and friendly. And do you know what? I'm happy with that, because that means you're a genuine human, and that's what we all strive to be.
Exactly.
So that I'm proud of that.
I think mysterious is overrated.
Well, I'm never going to achieve it, because I tell everyone everything.
Well, that feels like a lovely place to stop. But before we do stop, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you wish that we had, or any closing thoughts from you?
oh no, this is that interview question. They say, have you got any questions? And you haven't.
I think you've answered everything. I think you've answered everything.
And you sit there and go, oh, damn it. No, only that, just thank you so much for asking me. Like, I've really admired this series. And as I said, genuine human, does that whole concept of being a genuine human is so important for the whole world. If more of us, if everybody converted themselves into that mindset or tried really hard to be one, can you imagine how amazing the world would be?
You've been listening to Genuine Humans, brought to you by The Social Element. If you loved what you heard, remember to subscribe, or you can find out more at www.thesocialelement.agency.